Hello teachers, this is Desiree. You've set aside some time to calibrate the performance tasks that your students recently took in writing, so let's go ahead and start that now. The goals for today will be that you can access the tools for calibration, become familiar with the anchor papers for narrative, check your own alignment to the rubric with some unscored papers in a check set, and hopefully calibrate at least one piece of student work collaboratively. So today you are going to need your own laptop in front of you, a copy of the printed SBAC narrative rubric, and a piece of paper and something to write with to take some notes on. The first item we're going to look at is the calibration guide. It has the item stem, the task students were asked to write to. It contains the 3 SBAC rubrics for scoring, also a conventions chart to remind us of middle school expectations for punctuation and convention in each grade, condition codes that help us when a student did not at all respond to the prompt, and some information about the targets, how this task aligns to SBAC targets, claims, and standards. Now right here you may be asking, wait a minute, each of our students took 3 different tasks, and while that is true, let's remind ourselves of the exemplars that we have access to as of now. Currently, there is one set of anchor papers that we have released from Smarter Balance for 6th grade. We have some new material. There's some new argument exemplars released in 6th, new informational items released for 7th and 8th. But for narrative, we have one exemplar set available to us. So we're going to use that today across 6th, 7th, and 8th, remembering the rubric is identical across those 3 grades, the scoring process is identical, but you will have to transfer the compositions that your students wrote and those elaborations when you actually score your own papers. So I'm going to head over to the local and state assessment site and look at the 2016-17 interim assessment information and go down into 6th grade. You can scroll into 7th or 8th if that's your assignment. I'm going to scroll down past the task information, past the math window, to the calibration material. Hopefully you've printed out this rubric and have it in front of you, so I'm going to ask you to click on item 1, the narrative writing calibration guide, and open that, please. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to read that performance task, examine the rubrics, and read through the conventions chart to review what the expectations are for this particular narrative task. Please try to take about 10 to 15 minutes to do that work independently. Will you please go ahead and pause the video now? Thank you, teachers. So let's quickly review. The information you read talked about the 3 rubrics along the 3 traits that SBAC scores from: organization and purpose, development and elaboration, and convention. When we think about convention, we do not want to be in the mindset of counting errors, but rather holding in mind the concepts of variety, severity, and density. Variety speaks to students making error in both spelling, as well as grammar, as well as punctuation possibly. Having error across all 3 categories would be a variety of error. One category would not be a variety. Severity. What type of error is the student making? If it's an error that a 1st grader should have under control, that is a severe error. If the student is attempting sophisticated language and misspelling that, that would not be a severe error. Density. Does the composition have 10% of error within it or 70%? 70% would be dense error, 10% would not be. You also read about how SBAC defines elaborative technique for narrative as the process of developing setting, character, events, and ideas by carefully selecting pertinent, enriching details and putting them into the flow of the narrative. They highlighted that with their consideration of the 3 Ds: details, description, dialogue. So we want to hold that definition in mind when using the second scoring rubric for development and elaboration. I hope you noticed this line. In narrative, the use of sources is to be loosely interpreted. We are not expecting students to lift items from the selections nor quote anything. It's really a loose use of the sources provided. So let's start practicing. You have an exemplar set on the local and state assessment site. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to read through that material to really understand how the papers and rubrics align. So I'm heading back here into the local and state assessment site. Items 2, 3, and 4 are your anchor sets. 1 helps us to understand the organization purpose rubric. Item 3 helps us to understand the development elaboration rubric, and item 4 helps us to understand the conventions rubric. So will you please take items 3, 4, and 5 and about 15 to 20 minutes and independently read through those 3 sets to understand how the papers and rubrics align. Please go ahead and pause the video now. Thank you, teachers. So let's remember that using the scoring guidelines, each dimension on that scoring guide has a lot of descriptors to identify the qualities. So while this is not a holistic scoring process, it's not a point by point either. A 2 has quite a few bullets, you notice, that identifies that 2. And because there's a limited number of points on the scale, just those 4, each score point really represents a range. There are high 2s and low 2s. We don't want a 999 point rubric, but because it's a 4-point rubric, it's a bit difficult to really choose one score to represent that. So in thinking about that, try to remember the idea of preponderance. It's not expected that a score point has all of those bullets circled for that score point. A student can receive a 2 even if they have a couple of items that would really fall better under the 1 or under the 4. What we're looking for to place the score is the preponderance of evidence. Where does the preponderance of evidence for this student's structure, their organization, purpose lie on that rubric? We are not circling bullets. We are not counting up this many 4s, this many 2s, divide by 2 and average it out. We're thinking about where the preponderance of evidence lies. So now you have some time to practice. There are 3 sets of exemplars that are unscored. Let's call them check sets that you're going to practice scoring with your rubric. And what follows those are answer keys for scoring your check set and seeing how closely you align to SBAC's scoring. So back in your folder, starting at item 5 is the unscored check set for organization and purpose. Directly following is its answer key. Item 7 is the unscored sample set for development and elaboration. 8 is that answer key. 9 is the convention check set, and 10 is that answer key. So starting with item 5, you want to open, and I'll let you choose whether you want to work through each check set, score it, and then work through all the answer keys, or use the check set, score, and then review the answers. So please try to take 20, possibly up to 25 minutes to work through that task independently. Please go ahead and pause the video now. Thank you, teachers. I want to remind you that scoring is not the same as grading. Grading is a teacher's evaluation of a whole category of instruction. So when we grade, we think about everything we know about the student's progress in writing. Scoring is quite different. We look at one piece of writing, we gather the evidence from that one sample, and we place that evidence along the rubric, attempting to locate where the evidence, the preponderance of the evidence lies to justify a score for that particular evidence. If you have some time, would you please go ahead and with your grade level colleagues, choose 1 to 3 samples from the items that your students took on Illuminate and wrote to, and work together to score those samples. It's really important that as a grade level, you are calibrated. You are using those rubrics through the same lenses, and you have a common understanding about a 1 as opposed to a 2, 3, and 4. Now, before you pause, 7th and 8th grade teachers, you want to read the grade level narrative performance task item stem before moving on to calibrate together. So back in the local and state assessment site, you'll notice at the bottom of the folder the 7th grade narrative performance task, the 8th grade narrative performance task. Before you calibrate with your own student work, you want to review your student-specific tasks. Grade 6 teachers, you already read the task in the exemplar set that we used. So try to take between 15 and 25 minutes to calibrate at least one piece of student work together. Please go ahead and do that now. Thank you, teachers. I so appreciate all of the hard work that you're doing, and I know that you are working extremely hard across all subject areas that you teach. Thank you for your contribution to your students' success in that way. If you have any questions for me or items you'd like me to clarify, please feel free to email me at the email address there on the screen. I wanted to remind you also that you have quite a few writing units at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in narrative writing, informational writing, and opinion writing. Argument writing for 6th, 7th, and 8th. Those units include student checklists, student samples, teacher rubrics, links to DOK and SBAC considerations, day-by-day lesson plans, resource packets. So please make use of that material and let us know how we can continue to support it, add things to it so that it really benefits your instruction. Thank you again for your time and all of your hard work. Happy writing!